Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List. Today's very special guest is my friend Jetta, who is the Iron Cupcake on Letterboxd. She is here to take us through her top 5 favorite underrated disaster flicks. Jetta, welcome. Please tell everyone why you like this genre and how you came about narrowing it down to this top 5.
Well, first of all, thank you for asking me, and I'm very excited to be here. This is fantastic. The disaster genre is something that I have loved for pretty much as long as I can remember, and also something that I've feared for as long as I can remember. Because ever since the first experience I had with one of these movies on the list, I was terrified. I worried about, oh my God, what if this happened to me? What would I do? How do I face these fears? And so the wonderful thing about these movies is they get the blood rushing, they get the heart pumping. Either of those adjectives or verbs apply. But it's like the most amazing fear and terror possible. And as terrible as the dialogue might be, as questionable as the performances might be, there's just something so wonderful about being entertained in that popcorn way. And so it's like they transcend normal critiques. They transcend however you might assess other movies, because it's all about the action and the emotion.
You also picked, so we're not going to spoil it, but Jetta's top 5 all take place in a different compromising situation, which I really like, because it's not as though she picked, 5 disaster flicks that take place on a bus or a train. These are varied enough where you're going to be like, well, I didn't know that was something that I should be worried about, and now I am, which is my response to one of these movies, at least. I was like, I didn't know this was something that I should be afraid of. And now, great, if I ever go to New York City and I get in a tunnel, my brain's going to go off and say, do you really want to be doing this right now? So the variation is good.
I wanted to have a nice cross section of various possibilities, because sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's Mother Nature. You never know what could go wrong. Sometimes it's man-made, sometimes there are other factors. Anything and everything can go wrong in the world is basically what these movies teach us. So with that in mind,
we want to add to the general anxiety of 2022, just in case you don't have enough things to be worried about. So with that, we're going to start in our disaster flick top 5 for Jetta, which I just rewatched this past week. Number 5 is the 1997 classic Turbulence, which is directed by Robert Butler and came out the exact same time as both Air Force One and Con Air. So great timing there, whoever was in charge of marketing. But I do think this one is particularly unique in its zaniness. Jetta, tell us why you like this one so much and what particularly about it you think that other people would enjoy who've never heard of this movie.
Well, I think airplane movies are crucial to the disaster genre. There have been, amazing things like Airport 75. Airport 1975 is a classic, and it's actually very much linked to Turbulence, because it's all about a flight attendant who has to land a plane without pilots. That's a pretty classic aspect of plane disaster movies. And what I love about this is, in contrast with Airport 1975, which is just like a touchstone for me, because that was one of the movies that really made me love disaster movies, where the flight attendant can't do it alone. She has to have a man to help her. Turbulence gives you the chance to see the flight attendant do it essentially on her own. She has radio assistance, but she's got to do it on her own. And not only that, but she also has to deal with a man who may or may not, but probably is, but it takes us a while to figure it out, but we're still not sure for a while. Maybe. he's a serial killer. So, and it's a Christmas movie. So there's a lot going on here. It's just amazing to me that so much excitement can be drawn from this seemingly beyond ridiculous scenario. It should not work at all. We should be rolling our eyes at all the Christmas lights. But it's just like the utmost in commitment from Lauren Holly as the attendant who has to land this plane, and Ray Liotta, who's giving like the greatest performance I've ever seen from him as this totally deranged passenger. So that's like essentially where we're starting out. And then it has an amazing cast of character actors, Hector Elizondo and Ben Cross, who I wish was in the movie more because I love him. And it's just like the most fun you could have with this kind of movie.
Lauren Holly plays the flight attendant who just feels completely overwhelmed and ill-equipped, but it's kind of like it's put upon her, but she responds. Like she doesn't just like look to someone else. She's very gung-ho. I think she was nominated for a Razzie or might have won.
She was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that probably hurt her career, I'm sure. But one thing that Jetta said when we were discussing this prior was that you liked how committed that everyone is. Like they're all in. Like tell me what you said about how like you like when actors kind of give it their all, even if it's absurd.
Yeah, something that I absolutely love, really in any genre, is actors who just give 200%. Like you didn't think they could go that hard, but they do. And there's a scene where Ray Liotta is on the phone, and it's like, I didn't think it was possible for him to get this worked up over anything. Like, unbelievable, amazing. And there is a part of me that kind of believes that sometimes more acting is better acting because there's just so much to work with. It's so much. I would always rather that a movie or an actor give me too much than not enough. And there is always room for subtlety. I mean, I love subtlety in many respects, but in this genre, there is just something so delicious about an actor who just almost goes too far because it's so absurd. And, I really respect that. It's a choice, but it's a fun one, and it makes it worth going back to.
And I think it's different than Con Air because when I thought about it, Con Air is about a lot of characters, whereas Turbulence is really primarily Ray Liotta and Lauren Holly, and then, the air traffic controllers and such. But Con Air has way more, there's John Malkovich, and there's lots of different bad guys, and there's lots of different good guys. Whereas this one I felt like is a little bit more personal in a way, similar actually to your number one pick, where there's a personal focus that's deliberate enough to where it doesn't feel so general. Because a lot of disaster movies, there's such a big ensemble going on that it doesn't feel narrow. And I think Turbulence feels that way.
I think with other movies, as you say, there's so many characters, you get pulled in so many directions, and there's so many different people, you can't even figure out who do I care about the most. But with Turbulence, it's really just the hero's journey. You're seeing her evolve over the course of the movie. You see her find confidence again where maybe she didn't know she had it. And I think that that's really fantastic. I mean, it would be boring, I think, if she didn't have that growth that she needs to make over the course of the movie, and she didn't have to find the courage within her that she didn't know was there. So I think that's really excellent. And, there's room for other kinds of disaster movies where it is more about the action and less about the character development. But I really like what Lauren Holly has to work with. And I do think that Razzie nomination was unfair because, I think disaster movies are always kind of, they're always falling victim to that kind of negative critique because they just seem so silly. But, there's an emotional support there that I think exists within that context in the film.
Now, I'm going to ask you this for all of them, but what do you feel about, because these are two things that stood out to me with your films, score and special effects. So for Turbulence, how do you feel like the special effects were? And then the score is just so much that it just kind of, I feel like for all these, it kind of just brings you in. How do you feel about kind of the technical quality of it in comparison to something like Con Air or Air Force One, since they both came out and they're both plane stuff?
Well, I think those other two movies have bigger budgets. I don't think there was a huge special effects budget for Turbulence. I mean, there's gunplay, there's a little bit, there's violence, but it's not like tremendously special effects based. I think a lot of the action really comes from the tension of our main character in the cockpit and wondering, will she be able to get this plane down to the ground? So I don't know. I feel like it's not like ridiculous and it's not over the top. It does what it needs to do, and certainly Ray Liotta is, contributing everything he can to making the violence seem real and dangerous. But yeah, I mean, it's not overwhelming, and it doesn't seem poorly done, I don't think. And the score, I think, is fantastic. I honestly didn't pay attention to the score the first time I saw the movie a while back. Like, it kind of just washed over me like a lot of scores from disaster movies might. But this time, because you had mentioned it to me when you told me you saw it, I was really paying attention. And I was like, wow, that is actually kind of a beautiful score. Like, it's really nice in places.
It
the
is.
orchestral work is top notch. So I think it does a really good job, actually, like genuine good work.
It feels like it's got this great mix of taking itself seriously enough to have something like that, and then also being silly enough to where Ray Liotta is kind of, it's almost like he's winking at the camera, like he knows we're there and he's like, don't worry, I'll figure this out. Like stay with me.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a wink and a nod quality to Turbulence that I really enjoyed, where, it's contained within itself, but he also seems just like very aware that we're watching him.
The actors must have figured this is a Christmas disaster movie. I mean, there's just a level of ridiculousness that exists. They must have been thinking about Die Hard. That must have come to mind. So, yeah, I think the actors were well aware that this could come off a certain way. So that's where the commitment comes in. That's where, they know they have to give everything they've got to make you care about what's going on.
Now, did you see this when you were young? Like, did you see this? Okay, so you didn't see this one growing up, because some of these you did see when you were like...
Yeah, a few of them, okay. 3 of them, I think. But
okay,
this one was this was the most recent of all of them.
Okay, so this didn't make you afraid to board a plane?
Oh, no, other movies did that for me. Okay. I haven't been on a plane since I was, I think, 2 or 4. I don't remember it. It was long enough ago that it's just totally vanished from my memory.
You're like, you're not even afraid of it because it's not even in your purview. Like, you don't even think about it at all.
Well, it's just not a reality that I've ever had to think about, because where would I go? I don't know. Any vacation I've taken was by car or by bus. So, I've been sort of limited, I guess.
So the true test is whether Jetta can board a plane and not think of turbulence. I would think that you probably can't, but not in a fear way. At least this would just be kind of like, in a nostalgic way.
I would hope that it's more like Airport 1975, where all the seats are pink and purple in 70s upholstery. That's what I want. I want it to look like that.
We'll just pretend that's how it is, because Jetta doesn't know any better.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay, so Turbulence, check it out. This is, I rented this on Amazon, I believe. This wasn't streaming, but check that out if you can. It's not one that I had heard of before, and I really did have quite a lot of fun, especially if you're a Liotta fan and you want to get more of his filmography. This is great. This is classic, balls to the wall Liotta, where he's just putting everything he's got into it, and it's a joy. So highly recommend that one. Okay, so number 4, we got Daylight, 1996, directed by Rob Cohen. Also, I want to add that the order we're going in for Jetta is not necessarily ranking order. This is chronological. So we're going to be going back in time. So we started in 97. Now we're in 96. Jetta, tell me what you like about Daylight, and then also how it affected you as being in the city that you call home.
Well, my parents made the brilliant decision to rent this from Blockbuster. Late 90s, I'm going to say probably 98, 99. So I was about 6 or 7. And I was young enough that I could be absolutely terrified by the idea of the Holland Tunnel exploding. I live in New York. I've lived here my whole life. Every school trip I've ever taken in public school, from elementary school through junior high, was through tunnels. They were
Oh my
always in tunnels,
gosh.
never bridges. And I think it was the Battery Tunnel, but same difference. I was so just out of my mind with fear. And this was pre 9/11. So you can imagine the idea of, even if, I mean, in this case, it's an accident that causes it, but the idea that something could happen inside the Holland Tunnel, everything could explode, everyone would suddenly be worrying about fire and water, drowning, asphyxiating in holes in the wall. Like, everything that could go wrong in this movie does. And yet, Sylvester Stallone manages to figure out how to handle it all. So, I mean, this is a movie that literally caused me nightmares, and I couldn't revisit it until I was in my 20s. But when I revisited it and I realized it's actually like an incredible adrenaline rush, I could appreciate it. And I could still appreciate that, even though it still kind of makes me afraid. And in real life, I do still have claustrophobia, even thinking about tunnels. The Holland Tunnel is just like a no-go. But although I do take trains, so I don't know, it's kind of weird. But it's just unbelievable to me that that movie could have rewired my brain. And yet, I don't hate the movie. I love it because I love that it did that to me. And I love that it made me so aware of what a movie could do, that it could reach through the screen and actually affect me in real life like that. And yet I have this respect for it because it's just so exciting and I care about the characters and there's never a dull moment. It feels like, even though it's an almost 2 hour long movie, there's nothing boring in it. There's no wasted material. So, yeah, I mean, I think it has pretty much everything you could want, even a cheesy song in the end credits. So, it's got everything, the whole 90s package.
Yeah, and it's just, what did you say, flannel? Like
Oh, yeah,
everybody's
90s flannel. I mean, like Danielle Harris, like the typical 90s teen. I love it. It's got everything from that period. So, yeah, I mean, I just think this is like peak 90s Stallone action.
Yes, and it definitely, this is the one out of all of yours where like at least an hour went by and I didn't notice, because it's just so, going into it, I didn't know that there could be a disaster movie in a tunnel, first of all, because I'm not from a city, so, big city. So that whole concept to me was like, I was like, this is about a tunnel. They'll get out of there in no time. Like, what's the big deal?
That's what Viggo Mortensen thought. He learned.
And then you got Sly coming in, who's kind of like, ex
EMS.
EMS, right? Who's got kind of a chip on his shoulder, and Amy Brenneman, who you really like too. And I would say this one differs a lot from Turbulence in the sense that there's like the archetypes are involved, where you start to get into like the disaster movie stuff where you've got the couple with the child, or, you have different, this person represents this person represents this. They're all going to argue and be heightened, but there's more different nuance in the characterizations.
Yeah, I think this is the movie where you start to see redemption. Like, disaster movies are big on characters who need to be redeemed in some way. So, in Stallone's case, I don't remember if there's a specific reason why exactly he was fired from being a paramedic. Like, he was involved in something weird that got people killed, but we don't really know what it was, I don't think. Like, there's not a whole lot of detail involved in knowing what he did wrong, but because he's Stallone, we figure he's fine. Like, he didn't really cause whatever it was like bureaucracy. So, we believe in him. We care about his character. We want him to succeed. We know that he's right. Like, even when everyone's telling him, you can't possibly do it, you're crazy, we know that he knows what he's doing. What was your original question? I kind of lost my train of thought.
Well, that the characterization, like that there's more people that are represented.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you have.
Yeah. So he's being redeemed. You've also got J.O. Sanders as the father, who was involved in some kind of extramarital fling, and so he needs to be redeemed. He needs for his wife and his daughter to care about him again. You've got the busload of juvenile offenders, and they feel like they've got to be redeemed in some way, not necessarily because of what they've done, but because how they're perceived seems to be in a bad way. And so we need to, I don't feel like the movie makes it seem like we shouldn't care about them. I think from the get-go, we care about them, but it's more like the characters in the movie, like Amy Brenneman, has to get over the hump of thinking that they're bad people. And so, there's that aspect of, these are human beings, and they, can help out just as much as anybody else. We've got people from all walks of life. We've got the police officer. Amy Brenneman's character is a playwright. We see all these different facets of New York life happening in this one tunnel. So it is really a microcosm.
Well, and I think you had written in your review about the lady from Limelight.
Oh, yeah, Claire Bloom. Yeah.
Claire Bloom
Yeah.
is in this. And then Sly's own son is one of the juvenile delinquents.
Yeah, Sage. Yeah.
Sage. Right. And then I think the dad who has the affair, I mentally was like, oh, he was on Angels in the Outfield. That's, unrelated, but.
Oh, yeah, like this thing is teeming with character actors. Stan Shaw as the police officer and Karen Young as the wife. It's fantastic. So I love that about the movie. And also, like, Nestor Serrano as one of the paramedics just, like, pops up out of nowhere. Like, I love when character actors just, even if they're on screen for a second maybe, but they're fantastic. They do the job as required. So I love that.
Well, even the guys who are like, this is at the beginning of the movie, but when Sylvester Stallone first shows up, they're like, get out of here, man. This isn't your fight. You can't help us. Those two guys were people that I recognized. One of the guys from Shawshank Redemption, and then the other one is escaping me right now, but I remember thinking, oh, I know these guys. So that's kind of it's kind of our age too, but at the same time, it's like, it's a fun thing to revisit 80s and 90s movies and to see people that you recognize. You may not know their name, but it feels, it's just a comfort to see them in something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
New. Yeah. So Daylight is definitely intense. I read that a lot of people's favorite scene has to do with the exhaust fans.
Yeah, probably.
So there's some cool special effects and there's some cool, like, innovative stunt work going on.
Huge. Yeah. It looks like a huge budget went to doing all of that, to get all the fire. I mean, the explosion that creates all of this chaos is humongous. That's that's the big thing with me, why it affected me. So, it's an accident caused by these, jewel thieves who crash into a truck, which of course is carrying chemical waste.
Of course.
And, it's amazing. Those fireballs are just, it's insane. So it strikes me as very impressive. Even now, I think, I'm sure for the time it was, impressive, but even now I think directors would probably be pretty pleased with themselves if a movie came out looking like, because it feels real.
It feels very real. And I got to say, I have a new phobia, tunnels. And I didn't know that a tunnel could be that big too, because it's what is it? Connecting NYC and Jersey City or something. I think, right?
Yeah, the Jersey side.
Right. So check out Daylight. That was also a rental for me on Amazon. I don't think any of these were streaming.
No, don't think so.
Yeah. But this is worth it. And if you want kind of a early Sylvester Stallone that isn't Rocky, which a lot of people, just don't know to recommend, Daylight's a lot of fun. Number 3 on Jetta's top 5 disaster flick films is the master of disaster, Irwin Allen's The Swarm, 1978, starring a young Michael Caine, Catherine Ross, and an old Richard Widmark. Jetta, tell me what you love about The Swarm, because this is a special one. Out of all the ones on your list, this is the one that I'm most interested in what your personal reasons are.
Well, I love movies in particular when I know that a lot of people hate them. There's just something in me, twisted, awful, whatever you want to call it. I need to know when somebody else, or rather when a huge number of people, a swarm of people, you might say, think that something is awful. I need to know. I need to experience it for myself. And in this case, when it really is just terrible, I think we can say objectively that The Swarm is terrible, but it's hilariously terrible. Like, there are some movies, and it's a fine line, where they're so bad that they're just bad. There's nothing you can do about it. But other movies where it's like everything is working in concert to be incredible. It's just wild. Like, you can't believe the number of things that happen in this movie. Bees that cause explosions. Trains explode because of the bees. Like, it's too much. And
so many bees.
So many explosions. And so I think that is an incredible thing to have in the disaster genre, because it's great to have the movies that are serious and the ones that really do make you genuinely afraid for your life if you were ever in that situation. And I mean, yeah, if there was a swarm of bees after me, I would be afraid too. But it's so bad that, you have to love it, I think. And I understand when people, or if you, because I know you didn't love it, but I think there is a definite value for movies like that, because there's just no shortage in this, 2.5 hour movie. There's just no end to the number of character actors and stars and situations. Michael Caine in his Oscar-nominated safari costumes. What's he doing? He has no energy in this movie at all. He is just coasting along. It's amazing. I think it's great. And then you've got the love triangle between the senior citizens.
That's what I was gonna say, Jetta. I think you are a person who really values supporting narratives, because that's something that I see frequently in your reviews. Is like, you're like, okay, there's these main people, but then there's all these people over here that are doing interesting stuff. So like Fred McMurray. And there's these people on the side that Jetta is really it's almost like a soap opera setup in a way, where you don't necessarily have main characters because you have so many characters,
right?
So there's all these
ensemble.
Exactly. There's all these side plots. So the Swarm is killer bees. It's a lot of bees. The most bees that you'll ever see in your whole life in one place. I'm going to go out and say that as a definitive statement. And then when they hallucinate, they're gigantic bees.
Oh yeah, that's the best part. When people get stung, they see this humongous bee like right in front of them. What does that mean? Why would they see that? I don't know. That's Irwin Allen for you. He thought that would be exciting for the audience. I don't know.
Yeah, but then they all have that in common miraculously. So it feels like it's like divine. Like it's
yeah, like why do they all share the same? It's specific to the bee, I assume. I mean, it's not based on the person. They all get the same hallucination of the huge bee looming in front of them, like 8 feet tall or whatever. It's just
in
nuts.
their hospital bed, and then meanwhile, Michael Caine is like deathly serious as the what's the word for?
He's a scientist of some kind. He doesn't even really go into detail, I think, about what he does, or even he's on that when the movie starts. Oh, and that's another thing I love about the movie. Usually you see the inciting incident. You generally see the fire start or the boat sinking. You see something that starts the action. In this one, you don't see the bees let loose from a container of any kind. They're just out there. They're already on their
randomly
own, doing their thing. So that's another ridiculous thing. You just have to go with whatever Michael Caine is saying when the major and the various other army officials find him on this military base, and he says, "Oh yeah, there are these bees that are going to kill everyone. You better trust me." Sure, I mean,
sure.
Yeah,
so, and then it's like there's a mass dead ahead. That's how the movie starts, where he's like, there's a black mass dead ahead. And then you'd think like, okay, bees aren't that big of a deal. But when there's just so many of them and then they're coming at you. Another thing that I think is interesting is how many casualties there are, where it's just like left and right, people are just getting slammed with this thing. And then it's like, wait a second, how do we treat this? Like,
it's unbelievable. They wipe out entire towns. I mean, they destroy a power plant. The whole town is gone. It's awful. I mean, it is actually awful and disturbing, and yet because it's treated with this total seriousness, you can't help but laugh, because it's like, how can bees cause a train to crash? It's like, I mean, you can't believe it. And so somehow that turns around into, I think, comedy gold. How else do you, accept that bees could cause this level of chaos and catastrophe? I don't
Especially
know.
since they can't communicate. Or, I mean,
Well,
they're
not with the
not
humans. There
right.
is a disaster movie called The Bees
Oh
from, I
my
think,
gosh.
1978. And in that one, somehow the humans learn how to communicate in bee language. I don't know
Jetta.
what. Don't ask me how that happened, but it happened. So,
I'm saying they're like outrageously efficient and organized, considering that I don't know how they're communicating amongst one another. Like
mhm.
the bees are just like, it's almost actually like the birds,
Yeah, yeah.
where there's a sudden, like,
They have
not
a single-minded
it,
drive to cause destruction,
exactly
and you don't even really know why.
when normally they would be completely, fine on their own, minding their own business, doing whatever it is. Like you said, there's no instigator. Like nobody pissed these bees off that we know of. They just all of a sudden decide to cause like mass destruction and wreak havoc across this town full of Oscar nominated or Oscar winning actors.
Yeah, a huge number of people who are just beloved in the industry. I mean, Olivia de Havilland, like, it's incredible. You've got Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda, I forgot Henry Fonda.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
Olivia de Havilland has her southern accent. Henry
Hmm.
Fonda has his little bow tie.
What did you love? The turtlenecks.
Oh my God, the turtlenecks. Yeah, like
The Michael Caine
the
turtlenecks.
performances, the costumes, just everything happening in this movie. It's too much.
I did read that it is considered one of the worst movies ever made, which I'm sure just warms the heart of Jetta over here, who's just like, the worst movie ever made. Let me go see what I can like about this.
Yeah,
Because because it's such like a high budget movie that comes across as like a B movie.
a
B.
B movie.
A B
It's a
movie.
B movie.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, I was waiting to figure out where I should put some puns in.
There it is.
Yeah.
This is the perfect B movie on multiple levels, even though they had like a gigantic budget. And this is Irwin Allen, who was considered the master of disaster. Michael Caine reportedly said that he did it for the money
hmm
because his mom wanted a new house.
Right.
So that's where he's coming from. Catherine Ross is gorgeous,
hmm
as she always is in this film, because it's 1978.
Yeah.
So, and then just the cinematography and color and everything just kind of takes you back. I will say that the train scene is the standout where it's like, what could go wrong? Like, if you never thought that bees could take down an entire train, my friend, you are mistaken. Okay, so Swarm is also Amazon to rent. And then our number two is the great Towering Inferno, which coincidentally is not directed by Irwin Allen, although Irwin Allen's name was all over this because I saw his name in the credits several times. Like he directed the action scenes and
Yeah.
produced the film, but then it was actually John Gillerman who
Right.
did the actual directing. So tell us a little bit about Towering Inferno, which is arguably, I think, your most famous.
So the Towering Inferno, I think, is probably considered by most people to be the pinnacle of the classic 70s disaster genre. It just somehow feels like the classiest of all the movies. It, again, has an amazing cast, huge stars. It just kind of feels like it's a little bit apart from the rest of the pack. It has, first of all, a tremendous runtime. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes, so you're in it for the long haul. Although I would argue it's so good that I don't really notice it. And there are shorter movies that feel interminable to me because I just don't like them. But this one, I'm in it from the moment it starts. So essentially, it's the story of the Glass Tower. It's this unbelievably tall skyscraper in San Francisco. And you could also argue it's like a huge phallic symbol. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But you've got, on the one hand, the architect, Paul Newman, biggest star, like one of the biggest stars of the 70s. You've also got Steve McQueen, the firefighter, another huge star. You've got these two huge stars coming together to fight this blaze that unfortunately starts on the 81st floor. And you also have two studios coming together, Fox and Warner Brothers. So big that two studios had to do it because Irwin Allen convinced them. I guess he didn't want, because the film was based on two different novels, he didn't want competing movies. He had a stake in both of them, I guess. So he convinced these two studios, you got to come together on this, make one big movie. And it turns into this humongous epic. And it has a scope and an emotional depth that I think is better than anything else that the 70s had to offer. Because there are a lot of fun movies from the disaster genre, and there are a lot of movies that have genuinely good performances, like The Poseidon Adventure. I think that one is another one that justifiably got Oscar nominations, or at least one Oscar nomination for the acting. So, I appreciate the special effects and the craft, but it's the people involved who really make me care. Because the fire is amazing. I think people still consider the fire effects to be really impressive. But it's the characters, it's the performances that keep me coming back to it, and why I think the movie has been as impactful as it's been for really my whole life. Because this was one of the ones I saw as a kid, and it scared me, of course. The idea of fire in any building is awful. I would hate to, ever experience that. But in a skyscraper, it's 1,000 times worse. It's exponentially more terrifying. So everything about this experience, I think, is like the ultimate 70s disaster experience. And, Best Picture nominee.
It was nominated for 8 Oscars and won 3.
Yep.
So, I mean, this was a quite an ordeal. It was also the highest grossing movie of 1974, too.
Yes.
So people went. I believe Paul Newman and McQueen were like, they wanted to make sure that their billing, that
The staggered billing.
McQueen's name wasn't above Newman, so it's like diagonal in the credits, okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got William Holden and Faye Dunaway, who would be in Network later.
Yeah, like just the sheer number of huge A-list stars in this movie and Oscar winners and, people with really respected careers. It's just amazing that they all came together for this.
When you got Fred Astaire.
Oh, yes.
And you got Richard Chamberlain again. And then you've
Jennifer
got
Jones. So you've got all these different strata of characters and amounts of emotional development that you can care about. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's another reason why The Towering Inferno just is the peak of what the genre could provide, because everywhere you look, there's something interesting.
Yeah, and they do, as long as it is, they do break it up into segments. So you're following, like, you have certain people over here that are in some sort of catastrophe. You have certain people over here that are managing. And then I think that one thing that stood out to me that I really liked was how efficient the firemen were. Like, this doesn't feel like the logic they're using is completely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Like movie logic. It feels like they're actually mobilizing and they're organized. And Steve McQueen, to me, yes, he was the standout the most because he just seems so committed. And he does have these kind of emotional moments where he's like,
yeah, it's that Steve McQueen way, and it works. It works so well. I love the fact that you've got him just, dialing it back and giving only as much as the movie needs, which is perfect for his character. But then you've also got this incredible performance, I think, from Fred Astaire, which that's what always makes me just the most... I don't know if I've ever cried while watching the movie, but I feel like if there were a reason to cry, it would be because I think his performance is just so beautiful. And that's something that I think is probably surprising to people when they watch it, because, throughout his career as a movie star, he was, an incredible entertainer, an incredible dancer, like one of the greatest dancers of the 20th century. But his performances in those musicals were never like deeply emotional. They were entertaining. They were light.
Right.
They were never going into melodramatic territory. At least not usually, I don't think. So to see him give this performance in The Towering Inferno, it's beautiful, I think, and it's, I think, justifying the Oscar nomination in a way that goes beyond, well, he's old, let's just give him something. I think you really care about his arc, and you care about the fact that he has this love story that develops with Jennifer Jones that his character never expected. He never thought it would go in that direction. And it's really lovely. I think you care about what's going to happen to these two characters, really, in a way that maybe you didn't think would happen when their subplot starts. Because it seems, kind of lighthearted. It doesn't really seem like it's going to cause any major catastrophes. But yeah, it's incredible. And I think all the way through, Fred Astaire is like, I think I've described him as the human face of The Towering Inferno.
So this is a big cast. There's lots of explosions, lots of fire, helicopters, elevators.
Every facet of that building is used.
What is it called? Jetta Breacher?
The Breeches Boy. Oh my God. Richard Chamberlain. I mean, we've talked about this. I think his performance is like one of the best in the whole 70s disaster genre. Just like one of the best of the 70s period. He is so annoying. Like, it's all his fault. He gets more and more drunk. Just like everything he does, ripping up that ticket because he doesn't want to have to wait to use the Breeches Boy to get out of the building anymore. Kicking and punching people left and right. Like, he's doing everything, and I just think it is amazing. I know I've said amazing many times, but this is genuinely amazing.
It is quite entertaining. If you didn't know what that term meant, you will. I, as a person who is deathly afraid of heights, was like, I would die in that building before sitting in that chair. But, I guess, when in Rome, but I was like, this is terrifying. The most terrifying part to me of that movie was that chair.
I actually read, I think one of the women in the group that's supposed to go to meet the helicopter, which is another of the ultimate stupid things that happens in that movie. The fact that these women get those pilots killed. Oh, I hate that. I just yell every time I see that. But one of those women ends up being the woman who goes into the chair first. And it's like, she shouldn't be in that group. She's in the helicopter group. I don't know. It's like one of those weird continuity things that just kind of makes me laugh when I think of it. But I love the fact that there are so many details, little details that are worth noticing I don't know if you're going to keep watching this movie over and over like I have, but I mean, that's insane. But if you go back and watch it again, you'll notice new things. You'll notice the fact that the mayor's wife, who has that kind of blonde, updo, she's played by Mrs. Irwin Allen, Sheila Allen, who shows up in a few of his movies because, of course, why not? So I love that. I just think that's such a funny touch. So, of course, if you're watching it thinking, why does the mayor's wife have all these scenes? Like, why do we care about her character? Oh, it's Irwin Allen's wife. So I think that's fantastic. I love these little visual moments, like that moment, probably like halfway through, maybe an hour and a half in, when William Holden looks over and sees the reflection of the fire in that other building. That's a great moment. One of the things that I think is like incredible about The Towering Inferno is, unlike other movies where people are constantly aware of what's happening, a lot of the people in The Towering Inferno didn't see the fire. Like, they're up in the top of the building and they're just, there's the time when they see the people come out of the elevator who are burning, but the fire is below them. And so they have to just go on like faith that the firefighters are doing what they need to do because they're not even seeing the effects of what's happening. And when William Holden sees the fire in the other building's reflection, that's like, it's really driving home just how horrifying this is. So yeah, I mean, I love little details like that.
And you love the glasses.
Oh my God, yeah. The fact that he takes his glasses off before the big finale with the water, like, come on, man. Like, keep your glasses on. You're not going to see what's happening. And what, like, you're going to lose your glasses? Big deal. Like, I don't know. It makes me laugh so much. It's so stupid.
Jetta loves the small touches that make things unique. And this movie is full of them because it's so long and because there's just so many people. I feel like there's so many, at least the three main guys that are vying for, best actor. Like, they think that I feel like Newman, McQueen, and Holden take this movie desperately seriously. Like, this is not just a disaster movie. This is a serious movie. And so almost making it funny in that way, but then not, because I respect where they're coming from, and they are excellent actors. So check this out. I actually had to buy this movie to watch it. I'm sure there's another way to do it, but I told
It's
Jetta.
very expensive. Typically movies are going to be like $2 or $3 when you rent them, but this one's like 15.
Yeah, this one you have to buy to see unless you got other means. But I own it now, The Towering Inferno, so I'll have to do a rewatch sometime. And I do think that this would probably benefit from a big screen as opposed to
yeah. I've seen it on the big screen, and it was just, I watched it actually when I had no sleep, so my eyes were burning, just like The Towering Inferno. My eyes were like ready to pop out of my head, but it was incredible because I'd seen it before. I knew how great it was.
Yeah. And you went
worth it.
Anyway.
I did.
Dedication.
Just to see Paul Newman, who was like close to 50, doing those kind of like American Ninja Warrior things with like getting down that exploded fire, staircase. Amazing. I love that. Like, could he really have done that in real life? I don't know. But the magic of the movies tells me that he could. He doesn't need stairs. He's Paul Newman. He can do it.
He can
and
do
Jennifer
anything.
Jones in her flowing white gown. She'll do it.
They're game for it. They're up for it. Yeah, he seemed in peak physical condition. I had no idea how old he was. Okay, so number one, get to Jetta's number one pick, which is my personal favorite of the five, coincidentally, even though this is chronological order. This is The Last Voyage, which is 1960, Andrew L. Stone, which Jetta is the only person that I follow on Letterboxd who has logged this movie and seen it. So this is a kind of a hidden gem. And I will say, before I ask Jetta her thoughts, that I love how The Last Voyage starts in the credits. Like, this movie, unlike a lot of movies, literally the credits are rolling over the disastrous event occurring in the credit. Like, I was like, this is such a unique phenomena here. So this one takes place on a boat. Tell us who's in it, Jetta, and why you like this one as opposed to something like Titanic.
Well, no slight on Titanic. That has its place too. But The Last Voyage is probably the greatest example of a movie that just cuts to the chase, like you say, immediately. Yes. From the moment you start, you're finding out that there's a fire on board. You are in it from the moment, it begins. And it has an amazing cast, another cast of A-list actors, a lot of Oscar winners and nominees. You've got George Sanders as the captain, who, of course, makes many ridiculous decisions in the name of saving face. You've also got Robert Stack and Dorothy Malone, which I find very interesting because they play husband and wife, and they had just played brother and sister a few years earlier in Written on the Wind. So, very strange seeing them
which
married.
he won an Oscar for, right?
Yes, Dorothy Malone won Best Supporting Actress. And Stack was nominated too.
Right, Stack was nominated.
You've also got Edmund O'Brien as one of the engineers on board. He was also an Oscar winner, also one of my favorite actors, and I love a good New York accent. So the fact that he gets increasingly more agitated in that New York accent, wonderful. And then you've also got Woody Strode, who is the hero of the piece, as the crewman who gives blood, sweat, and tears to helping this family with Stack and Malone, because they're really the heart of the movie. You don't focus on lots and lots of side characters. It's one family in peril. And, gosh, am I forgetting anyone? Oh, Jack Crucian, who plays the chief of the engineers, who unfortunately bites the dust very early on, so that's really not a spoiler. But he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Apartment that same year.
Oh, and don't forget Jill.
Oh, Jill. Oh, my God. She really, I think, considering that she didn't, have any or very much acting experience, and she has like bright red hair, like the brightest horror movie red hair you've ever seen on a little child. But she does pretty well. Like, you really care about how afraid she is. So.
Yes, she looks like a total horror child actress. Like, she's Robert Stack's and Dorothy Malone's daughter, supposedly, and she's like got red hair, and it's just hilarious that she's like pretending to be their spawn.
Yeah. But basically, this is a very simple story. There's a fire on board, a lot of machinery down in the boiler room that doesn't work anymore. This is a ship that is over the 30-year limit. Ships are apparently supposed to be sent out to the yard after 30 years, and this one, I think, is 38 years old. So this boat really is like on the verge of total collapse when the movie starts. And so when this fire takes place and explosions are soon to follow, you just have to follow this one family, hoping against hope that someone will get Dorothy Malone out because she's been trapped by debris. So yeah, it's pared down to the absolute essential, and I love that. It's a great example of the most economic storytelling you could possibly have in a disaster movie. And I think it's just incredible from start to finish in 91 minutes.
Yeah, and it doesn't really let up. And then meanwhile, like O'Brien like keeps calling up and talking to him, and he's just like, like what's the point? Because it's
he's so crabby.
he's so like, because I think his dad was on the Titanic.
Yes.
So he's already set up as like he can't stand all this like, bureaucratic money nonsense.
Right.
And right from the get-go, he's kind of like, hey, this is going to spread. You need to get everyone off the boat. And he's like, oh, it's similar to Inferno, where it's like, well, we're going to cause widespread panic. But in this instance, they're literally in the middle of the sea. Like Towering Inferno, at least they're planted. Like this is like they're out in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody else. And they're not at their destination. And then this is already an old ship, so they don't want to lose money by saying like, oh, if we have an event now, we might not get people to come on this again.
Right.
So there's all these different stakes, but it does really hone in on this one woman trapped in kind of like a lot more personal way than some of the other ones.
Yeah. And you become so invested in what this family is going through. There's this incredible conflict. We're not going to spoil it, but there is this great conflict toward the end with Malone and Strode. And you know that Strode's going to make the right call, but he has this really tremendous decision he has to make. And you can see that he knows what he wants to do, but he's like really in pain because of like what he's being asked. And so you really, really care about what they're going through. And, even if you have faith that something good will happen and they're not going to die on this cruise, you're not sure. You're really not sure because this seems so awful. And how is anyone going to get to them in time? And will they find the equipment they need? And it is a real thrill. It's suspenseful right till the end. And the special effects, I think, for 1960 are fantastic. I think that you really believe that this is a ship going down. And, to some extent, I think Irwin Allen, when he did the Poseidon Adventure a dozen years later, improved on it because, 12 years will give you a little bit better with special effects. But this one feels totally plausible, I think. And I think that a lot of it also has to do with the editing. I think it's edited so well that there's no waste. There's just everything that you need is right there. So the direction and the editing go hand in hand. And in fact, the director and editor, Andrew and Virginia Stone, were married. So it's a perfect partnership. You even see in the end credits, it says over the end, an Andrew and Virginia Stone production. So there's no way in which those two are separate. It's got to go hand in hand.
Yeah, and this fits in with so Jetta's doing a project right now where she's focusing on women editors, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is also one on the list that actually ended up being that. And actually, to contrast them, especially with the Irwin Allen flicks, this one's half the time, and it's still very amped up. So even though this is a crisp 91 minutes, whereas the other ones are almost 3 hours. And it's very lean, like you said. Every moment punches.
Yeah. I love that it accomplishes all the same goals, but without the self-indulgent qualities, like without the excess that comes with, the baggage of having so many more actors and so many subplots and the need to, keep the audience invested in too much. I mean, there are ways in which I think that works wonderfully in The Towering Inferno, for example, because there are so many actors I love, and I'm genuinely interested in those developing situations. But with The Last Voyage, there's just something so excellent about laser focusing on these particular people, because there's chaos happening elsewhere on board. You don't know how many other people are dying. You don't know how many other people are going through those same pains and heartaches and losses. But just focusing on these people, I think it still gives you the sense of just what a tragedy this is, because you know that if it's happening with them, it's happening with a lot of other people. So I think that's incredible. I think it's really something to feel that way about something that is so specific in its focus. And I credit the actors as much as anything else, because I think they really give wonderful performances. And just to see Woody Strode do this in 1960, to give a totally unstereotyped performance for a Black actor when it was still so difficult for that to happen in Hollywood. And to see this happen in his breakout year when he also has Sergeant Rutledge for John Ford and Spartacus, like that's pretty fantastic. I just love that he gets this spotlight.
And he elevates it to such an extent. I mean, like, I would want that guy on the ship.
Yeah.
I'm completely convinced in like his competence, and when he's like, I'm not leaving, like, and he doesn't know these people,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, so it's also a really kind of a heartwarming thing about like humanity, like coming together and helping one another when they didn't know each other prior, and then everyone's just kind of doing their best.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking to something you just said, it's like heroism against extraordinary odds is what makes disaster movies so great, and maybe arguably why people don't like The Swarm as much, because there isn't quite as much of that going on. With something like The Last Voyage or The Towering Inferno, Daylight, maybe a little bit with Turbulence, you've got people who never thought they would be in this situation. They never expected the sinking or the fire or the explosion or whatever they're dealt in, that trauma. But they find a way to deal with it, and they find a way to help other people, even if they didn't know them. They never met them before that day. But Woody Strode in this movie just knows instinctively he's got to do this. It's the right thing. And
Right.
as much as he wants to help his fellow crewmen, helping this family is the most important thing, because they're human beings too, and nobody else is going to do it. So he has to step up. And you don't always get that in disaster movies. I picked some that do have that, but to see that in this one, I think is especially heartwarming and just lovely. And he has this fantastic presence.
The Last Voyage is very fun. I kept accidentally calling it The Lost Voyage. Last Voyage, 1960. That is also on Amazon, but it's a nice little comfort movie in a way, because I find this odd, but now that I've watched these in 5 movies in 1 week, I think one of the appeals of disaster movies is what you're highlighting here, which is the humanity, where we need to remember every now and again that if we were all in a crisis situation with total strangers, the majority of people would help one another. And I think that that's kind of a subconscious desire to kind of rest in that. Like, yeah, maybe we're all whining and complaining in general, like if we went to Starbucks and somebody got our order wrong, but if we were trapped in an elevator and there were fire, we would not be so petty, hopefully.
Yeah.
Unless we're Richard Chamberlain.
Well, of course. Nobody does it better. But
Nobody does it.
There's tremendous suffering, and there are huge, loud, bright special effects. But in the end, what you always care about most is what happened to those people. That's always going to make you want to come back to these movies, and what makes you feel the most drawn to them. There are a lot of movies, Transformers, there are a lot of movies that have money put into the special effects, but when you have people like Woody Strode or Fred Astaire, or I guess you could even say Sylvester Stallone, that's what keeps you invested.
It's the character arcs and the people. Yeah. I agree. So yay for disaster movies. Okay, so now we're getting into the popcorn questions, the Inside the Actors Studio inspired top 5. I have no idea what Jetta is going to say. I'm so excited about hearing her answers. So we're going to dive right in, Jetta. Number 1, what do you think is the most underrated movie?
So I had to think about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the one that I think the most people need to have heard about, because I feel like it's too obscure for its own good. There's a movie from 1994 called Captives. It has Tim Roth and Julia Ormond. She is a prison dentist. He is a prisoner. This takes place in London. And naturally, they're drawn to each other. Naturally, they have this chemistry, this thing between them they can't deny. But it's dangerous because she doesn't know what he's been jailed for. And she's also a divorcee. She just left Peter Capaldi, who has an incredible haircut. You don't know where this is going to go. You don't know how dangerous it could be. You don't know what being in this relationship could mean for him because of the other prisoners, because they become jealous. And also, again, she's a dentist, so there are a lot of cleaning scenes. It's just...
Jetta.
It's incredible. And I think it's a 5-star movie.
Wow. I've never been so sold on one that I want to go watch it right now. Captives. Who directed it? Do you know?
It was made by a woman named Angela Pope, who worked in
Okay.
British TV and film. And unfortunately, she had a very short career. I don't know what she's been doing for the last 30 years, because I think the last movie that she completed was in 1996. And since then, her career has just stalled. So I'm not sure what she's up to right now, but I think that she showed so much promise with this movie. And I love it. It's, if you love Tim Roth, as I do, and also Julia Ormond, who is also excellent in it, I just think that this is such an easy recommendation. You know, I've seen people say that it's maybe a little cheesy, maybe the plot is too melodramatic because it's a prison and because it also has to do with prison violence, but it's like the romance. Like, come on, they the way they want each other so badly that they're willing to defy law. I mean, I don't know, pretty good.
I love this recommendation. Captives.
The sexiest movie ever made about dentists.
About dentistry. 2, what is your happiest movie experience?
Absolutely, it's when I saw Point Break for the first time.
Aww.
I saw Point Break at the Museum of Modern Art. I went with a friend. We had never seen it before. And the feeling of being in that theater, this was around a decade ago, maybe 2011, being in that theater, I don't think I'd ever seen a Catherine Bigelow movie before. I had no idea what to expect, except that I love Keanu Reeves and I love Patrick Swayze, so that was enough for me. But that movie is so exciting on the big screen when you've never seen it. Everything feels so iconic, and that skydiving scene is just like the greatest thing you could ever see in a theater. To see Patrick Swayze basically like dancing through the air. He does this flip. It's like, of course, he's Patrick Swayze. He doesn't need a floor. He has the open sky. I mean, it's amazing. He looks like he's literally on cloud 9. He's the happiest he could ever be. And it was just so beautiful. And I just remember leaving that theater with my friend, and it was like we were elated beyond belief. We could not believe how much fun we had had with that film. And I don't know how many other movies could have that experience for me. It was just, perfect.
And did the audience really get into it too?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people were there who knew the lines and were saying them. And that doesn't always happen at MoMA. A lot of people are generally much more refined and reserved. They were so excited to be seeing this. It was great. It was a whole Bigelow retrospective, and I think this was, if not the opening night, then one of the first screenings. So people were really amped up. And yeah, it was beyond words. I can't describe how happy I was.
It's like being transported.
Yes. And not only that, I saw the film a second time on the big screen in a different theater. This is a little different because, of course, then I'm not seeing it for the first time, so a little of the thrill is gone in that same way. But I went with a different friend who had also never seen it, so I was getting to see it through her eyes. And which was even crazier because she either lost her glasses or left them at home, like before she got to the theater. So we had to sit in the second row, and it was like I was breaking my neck to see the screen.
Oh.
But it was still so much fun that way because it's like, wow, this must be like unbelievable for her. She can't even really see what's happening, but it's still so enjoyable. And I could tell she was laughing a lot, so she really enjoyed it. But like that was wild too. So both of those together were great. But the first one, just
hands down.
Yeah.
Number 3, I'm interested in what you're going to say here. What is a movie you changed your opinion on, whether for good or ill?
Like a lot of people when they're young, they think, I guess, when they see a movie and they feel a certain way, this must be the way it is. Like, I don't get it, so it's not good. I saw The Seventh Seal when I was a teenager, and I'd never seen a Bergman film before. And I knew the iconic images. I understood what it was about, like on an intellectual level, but I didn't get it. And I thought it was bad. And I thought because I felt that way then, that must be the way it would always be. I would never change my opinion. But, of course, with time, things change. You start to see things in a new way. Watching more Bergman films, they give me a deeper appreciation for his skill. Getting into the kinds of stories he liked to tell and appreciating his storytelling, the themes he liked to go back to over and over again. And just the fact that it's a movie about death and thinking about mortality, that's not necessarily something you can connect with when you're really young. And as time goes by and you know more people who've passed away and you think more about the state of the world, it just changes. And so I think the first time I revisited it in full was at the start of the pandemic. And so watching it in March 2020, after having seen probably 20 more Bergman films over the course of those 15 years in between or whatever, it was just totally different. And all of a sudden I felt a different way that I never really could have. I mean, I could have anticipated it based on loving more Bergman films and really saying that I'm a fan, but all of a sudden it felt like it made sense to me. And it spoke to me in a way that it never did when I was just way too young and, I don't know, immature, didn't have the groundwork that I needed to appreciate it. So, I think I'm big enough to be able to say that I didn't get it then. It just flew over my head, and now I feel like it is truly one of the greatest films I've ever seen. And as I continue to think about it and have watched it again since then, it just grows more and more in my estimation because it's truly, it's a unique film. It's like nothing else that he did, and it's really like nothing else in the global cinema canon. So, yeah, I'm able to say now that I understand it.
This is like one where I think I saw Seventh Seal, and I'd only seen a couple of Bergman. So I definitely am with you there where I wasn't ready and I wasn't particularly wowed. I knew the chess death portion of it. I knew Max von Sydow was in it, who's kind of in several of Bergman's. And then, but I had been so blown away by Fanny and Alexander and Virgin Spring that I think it was hard to quantify it. But you're right. It is kind of unique in its own sort of spiritual, contemplative realm that has kind of a fantastical quality too.
Yeah.
So that's a good, I'm glad you said that because I need to rewatch that. I didn't give it very high the first time either.
Yeah.
I kind of was like, nah.
I think it's just when you're young and you don't have enough experience, and it's easy to be bored by things that you're not familiar with. It's hard to grasp those grown-up concepts sometimes, and you just haven't gone through certain things that will give you a different perspective. So, it took time, but I got there, and I'm glad.
That's a great one. Okay, the fun question. An actor that you find undeniably sexy.
Well, to answer this, I will now refer to my one piece of paper I have here. This is a 2-sentence review that I published on Letterboxd on August 7th, 2020.
So excited.
This is my half-star review for the magnum opus known as Kangaroo Jack. This is the only accurate way to pay homage to one of America's unofficial sexiest men alive, Michael Shannon, on his birthday. I feel certain he would agree. So, with that in mind, Michael Shannon, everyone who knows me knows this. Everyone makes fun of this. I just dragged my brother to see Bullet Train on my birthday because Michael Shannon was in it. I don't know that my brother really appreciated that in that way, but amazing. Love him. I actually came up with a whole list of reasons I wanted to give that would just go on way too long. I actually have, in my dining room, I have a wall that's dedicated just to photos of actors that I love. And Michael Shannon is right in the middle. But it's because his talent is so remarkable. I think when I love someone's talent, that is like that's the sexiest thing that a person can have as an actor. If they're talented, that makes them appealing.
I understand.
That is what creates it, really. I mean, there are physical ways too, I think, but it's like that. Oh, but I'll give you a great example. It's not the first example, but it's one of the best examples.
All right, I'm ready.
I don't know if you've ever seen the show At Home with Amy Sedaris.
No.
Well, Amy Sedaris is hilarious.
Yes.
It's a show that unfortunately was canceled, but it was on True TV for a few years ago. And one of the things that I love the most about Michael Shannon is his wacky sense of humor. So dry, so bizarre. And he doesn't get to play a lot of great comic roles. He just gets, like Shape of Water and whatever. But he was in an episode of At Home with Amy Sedaris where he plays, because it's essentially like a Martha Stewart type satire of homemaking craft shows. He plays this tall, dark, mysterious stranger who comes to her house. And of course she lets him in because why not? And that, I think, I'm going to go on record saying that is one of the ultimate sexy Michael Shannon roles. It's fantastic. He sits around in his underwear for no reason for one scene. And it's just because, why not? Why not?
He also does that great bit. You just reminded me of it because I don't think of him as comical, but he does do that hilarious thing where he's like talking as the head cheerleader. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The sorority thing. Yeah.
The sorority, Funny or Die.
Yeah.
That is hysterical. But I mean, I will think about this now. Now that you have like completely taken me off guard, I will think about what would be the closest, I suppose, Bug, because he's kind of like, he's literally all out there.
It's so intense. Yeah.
I mean, and he's so. But he always is intense. The movie with Jessica Chastain,
Take Shelter. That was another early one for me. Yeah.
He's so intense. He's intense in a more subdued way, but still the Midnight Special movie.
Oh yeah, I love all those Jeff Nichols movies. Yeah,
Jeff Nichols. But yeah, I mean, he is not chill, except maybe in like Knives Out.
But that's what I think makes him such an interesting actor, because he's able to do these incredibly intense things, and yet when you see him in interviews, he's so laid back and so funny, and you see this
he's like
totally
wearing
different
Hawaiian shirts.
Oh yeah, well his fashion sense is just unparalleled, but
Jetta.
He's so funny, and I love that. Actually, another thing I wanted, since we're thinking about interviews, I typically do not watch The Tonight Show. It's just not my thing. But one thing that will always make me tune in is if Michael Shannon is the guest, because I know that he will be funny. I know that Jimmy Fallon will make him laugh in some way, and that's worth it to me. In fact, now that I think of it, there's one in particular, I think it was like probably within the last year. They did a game. So you can find this on YouTube, and it was called Slow Turn, Tiny Nod. And it's just about turning your head and nodding. And it is so stupid, but it is so funny. And that is like peak Michael Shannon.
All right, Jetta.
He's so good. And he looks great. Great.
I'm going to make it my mission in life to get to a place where I can meet Michael Shannon, and we're going to come to Brooklyn.
Oh, my God. Well, he's in Brooklyn. I think he already lives in Brooklyn.
Okay, listen, I'm going to come to Brooklyn with Michael Shannon, and we're going to drop by. Jetta, I can honestly say that I never thought that asking such a question would reveal the level. This is like how I used to feel about Leonardo DiCaprio in the 90s. Like, hats off. Like, this is like a level that I deeply respect because it comes from a true place.
Absolutely.
So, Michael Shannon, I will find his sexiest role and then mention it someday.
I mean, honestly, you should see Bullet Train. He has a wig that is just like, wow.
Jetta, we're going to move on.
The wind through his wig. Oh, glorious.
Okay, final question. If you were to die and come back as a movie character, who would you choose?
So, had to think about this quite a lot, as you might imagine.
Yes, it's tough.
So I thought about movies that I'd rewatched recently that I really love. And I've mentioned this to you before, but I love Jeffrey Combs. He is just like one of the B-movie icons of all icons to me. And he was in a movie in 1992 called Dr. Mordred, which is basically like a knockoff Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange with like $10 budget. And he plays a wizard who can move through time and space. He also owns an apartment building in New York, which is like, what?
As one does.
He spends all his time in a bathrobe, like a gold silky bathrobe. Why not? He falls in love with a neighbor, of course. She's very cute. He's also a respected criminologist. So he's got an amazing job. He's got a great, thing set up as a landlord. Although I don't think it's great that the tenants don't know who he is. So on their side, that's kind of not great. You should know who's running the building. But everything else is like, wow, I would love that life. I'd love to spend all my time just like hanging out in a bathrobe with my pet raven and, somebody cute next door and a job that apparently pays me well, even though it's not clear where he got his training, and doing whatever he does out in space, fighting the bad guys. That seems like a good set of ways to live. And also he loves movies because he talks about It's a Wonderful Life. And it's like, oh, he really just wants to hang out with his girlfriend and watch movies.
Which brings you back, you're bringing it back full circle now because Ray Liotta can't shut up about It's a Wonderful Life.
I did not think of that, but that is so true.
Well, you brought it back.
It's another Christmas movie, I guess. So
from the end to the beginning, Ray Liotta loves Buffalo Gals. Can you come out tonight? Won't you come out tonight? Wow. Okay, so tell me that name again, Dr.
Mordred. It was made by the father and son team of Charles and Albert Band, who made all these great full moon features and just like the schlockiest of schlock. Can't do any better than that.
That's who Jetta would want to be. A gold robe, a cute next door neighbor, and a criminologist who gets to chill out every day and relax and then fight things in space. What could be better?
And stop the world from exploding into chaos. I mean, he's going to save everybody somehow.
Yeah. I mean, that is the life.
Totally.
That is the life. Okay, so to recap, Jetta, it's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. We want you to watch this list. Number 5, Turbulence. 4, Daylight. 3, The Swarm. 2, The Towering Inferno. And 2, The Last Voyage. I'm Amy Henserling. This is Jetta at the Iron Cupcake on Letterboxd. Please follow her. She is wonderful. And we will see you at the movies.